December 30th, 7 a.m. in heavy snow and jamming, Russia rushes a pontoon crossing as Ukrainian drones lock onto the hinge point.
December 30th, 7 a.m. local time. A narrow stretch of river along the contact line disappears under blowing snow. Visibility is so poor that, to the naked eye, the banks seem to dissolve into white space, the kind of morning that looks empty and inactive. It is exactly the kind of weather that convinces people nothing serious can happen. That assumption is wrong. The storm does not stop movement, it hides it. Russian forces are under pressure to open a temporary crossing, something fast enough to move vehicles and supplies without routing back to fixed bridges already under threat. The plan is simple in concept and dangerous in execution. Assemble a makeshift pontoon bridge under cover of weather and electronic noise, then push across before the window closes. By 6 a.m., engine heat begins to register long before shapes become visible. A T-80 BVM, modified and scarred from previous fighting, rolls forward not as an assault vehicle but as an anchor for an engineering task. Behind it comes the TMM-3 bridge system, designed to unfold, lower, and lock into a usable crossing within minutes if nothing interferes. On paper, it is fast. In reality, every second on the river is borrowed time. The danger is not building the bridge, but keeping it alive. A pontoon only has to fail once. If the structure loses alignment or a key joint collapses under load, the crossing becomes useless instantly, blocking the route and trapping anything already committed. Russian commanders understand that risk, which is why the bridge does not go in alone. At 7:10 a.m., electronic warfare systems come online. Pole 2-1 and R333Z8 begin saturating the area with interference, aimed at disrupting drone control links and degrading navigation signals. The goal is not total blindness, but delay. Every Ukrainian operator forced to fight interference is one less operator lining up a clean strike. What the jamming cannot hide is heat. By 7:14 a.m., Ukrainian thermal UAVs pick up the scene clearly. The river surface reads cold and flat, while engines, hydraulics, and metal structures glow bright against it. As the first pontoon segment lowers toward the water, its movement is unmistakable on thermal, even through snow and clutter. Ukraine does not react immediately. This is not a target to hit impulsively. A pontoon bridge can absorb damage and still function if the wrong part is struck. The real vulnerability lies in the hydraulic joints and connection points that hold the structure rigid. Break those, and the bridge does not just take damage, it fails. The Russians anticipate surveillance and counter it in their own way. Fiber optic drones begin moving low along the banks, scanning without relying on radio links that can be jammed. These drones do not announce themselves electronically. They watch quietly, searching for launch positions and movement patterns that suggest an ambush is forming. By 7:20 a.m., both sides are committed. Russian engineers rush to lock the first section in place, fighting current, wind, and cold with practiced urgency. On the Ukrainian side, teams finalize targeting, tracking not the center of the bridge, but the moment when weight, alignment, and timing converge into a single weak point. To an outside observer, the river looks empty, swallowed by snow and fog. In reality, it has become a narrow corridor of competing clocks. One side is racing to finish a crossing before it is seen as complete. The other is waiting for the exact second when a single strike can turn a shortcut into a dead end. December 30th, 7:24 a.m. The bridge is not finished, but it is far enough along to create momentum. Once the first segments are locked, everything after that becomes easier, faster, and harder to stop. Russian engineers understand this, so they work in a rhythm that looks almost rehearsed. Lower, lock, stabilize, repeat, while vehicles idle close enough to surge forward the moment the lane is declared usable. Ukraine's teams treat this phase like a trap that hasn't snapped yet. They don't rush the strike, because a rushed hit can waste the entire advantage. A pontoon section can be punctured and still float. A vehicle can be damaged and still be replaced. But if the connection points fail while load is transferring, the whole crossing turns into a blockage, and that is the outcome that reshapes the next hours on the map. 7:28 a.m. Ukrainian drones shift positions, not higher but smarter. Instead of hovering where jamming can chew the link apart, they use tree lines and low terrain to peek into the river corridor in short windows. They don't need a continuous live feed. They only need enough confirmation to mark the hinge points, the joints where the bridge locks, the ramps where weight transitions, and the exact spot where an engineering vehicle has to pause to align the next section. Russia keeps trying to erase those windows. Pole 2-1 interference thickens in pulses, not constant, but timed, like a hand squeezing and releasing the signal. It creates a dangerous illusion. The picture clears for a moment, then collapses, then clears again, forcing Ukrainian operators to question whether what they saw is still true. That doubt is part of the defense. But the river itself defeats the illusion. Even when the feed stutters, the thermal signature persists. Hot engines remain hot. The bridge metal holds heat differently than water, and as more equipment gathers near the bank, the scene becomes easier to read, not harder. The jamming is slowing decision-making, but it is not hiding the buildup. 7:33 a.m. Russian security elements begin pushing outward from the site. This is not a dramatic assault, just practical protection. Infantry spreads along the near bank. A vehicle-mounted team scans the opposite tree line for any sign of movement. And overhead, the first Russian FPV patrols appear fast, low, hunting for the telltale pattern of Ukrainian launch crews. Ukraine counters by doing something that looks passive but is aggressive in intent. They stay quiet. They minimize radio chatter. They avoid obvious staging. They let the strike package wait until the Russian defenses feel confident enough to commit weight to the crossing. The moment a heavy vehicle rolls onto an incomplete pontoon, the bridge stops being a construction project and becomes a single point of failure. 7:38 a.m. The first test load approaches. A vehicle creeps toward the ramp, slow enough to look cautious, but not slow enough to be hesitant. The engineers keep their heads down, focused on alignment. The escort elements keep scanning outward. Everyone is acting like the only threat is a strike from above. That is the mistake Ukraine is counting on, because the strike does not need to destroy everything. It only needs to break the bridge in a way that forces the Russians to stop using it. If the crossing becomes unstable, command will hesitate to send more vehicles over it, and hesitation at a river is a kind of defeat. The final preparation happens almost silently. Ukrainian teams confirm the hinge point again, not the middle of the pontoon, but the segment where the ramp meets the first floating section, where weight transfers and stress concentrates. If that joint fails, the bridge doesn't just take damage, it folds. 7:44 a.m. The river corridor goes briefly quiet, not because nothing is happening, but because both sides are holding their breath. Russian forces are seconds away from proving the crossing works. Ukrainian teams are seconds away from deciding whether they hit now or let the trap tighten further. And that is where the story pivots, because once the first vehicle commits onto the pontoon, there is no longer a safe try again. The crossing will either become a rout or become a wreck. 7:38 a.m. The crossing site finally looks ready from the Russian side, but it's the kind of ready that only exists on a map. A TMM-type bridge layer has edged down to the riverbank, the metal span angled like a ramp, while a column of support vehicles waits behind it in a tight, impatient line. From Ukraine's perspective, this is the moment they've been waiting for, because a river crossing is not just a vehicle problem, it's a timing problem, and timing is the one thing a convoy can't armor. The Russian formation doesn't rush the first move, it rehearses it. The bridge layer creeps forward by meters, pauses, creeps again, and every pause creates a predictable rhythm that can be read from overhead observation and ground-level optics. That rhythm is exactly why the Ukrainians don't strike early. If you hit too soon, the Russians back off, scatter, and try again elsewhere, and you get one dramatic clip but no lasting effect. So, Ukraine holds the fire and uses the air above the river like a stage. Small drones appear at the edges of the Russian air picture, not to win the sky, but to force constant checking, constant tracking, constant distraction. The decoys are the trickiest part because they don't need to be convincing as weapons. They only need to be convincing as problems, and the script's detail matters here. The decoy drones are set up to look real enough on sensors, including simple infrared signatures that keep defenders staring upward. Russian troops respond the way the script describes: quick, practical, and frustrated. They're not spending missiles on small drones, so they rely on short-range fire and improvised counter-drone methods, including shotguns, trying to swat the airspace clean long enough for the bridge vehicle to finish its job. But that defense posture creates a second vulnerability. When everyone's eyes are scanning for buzzing threats, the real danger is the one that shows up low, fast, and late, right when the bridge layer is committed and cannot reverse without wasting the entire attempt. That's when the Ukrainian FPV strike package moves, led by Wild Hornet-type drones in the script's framing. They don't fly in like a cinematic wave. They appear like a sudden correction to the whole scene, slipping toward the one hinge point that matters: the bridge layer itself. The Russian soldiers do catch it, but catching a drone in the last seconds is not the same as stopping it. They fire, they swing barrels, they try to cut it down, and the crossing site turns chaotic in a way that feels small, just shouting, muzzle flashes, and people moving too close together near heavy equipment. Then the critical hit lands where it hurts most, not on the bridge, but on the vehicle that makes the bridge possible. The FPV slams into the bridge layer at the worst possible moment while the machine is aligned, weighted forward, and already fighting the riverbank like wet concrete. The result is immediate and ugly, exactly as the original tone implies. Metal shifts, the span loses stability, and the bridge layer doesn't just fail, it collapses into the river in a way that turns a crossing point into a blockage. For the Russians, this isn't just losing a vehicle, it's losing the road itself, because now the wreck sits in the water like a mangled door jamb, choking the only viable lane the convoy was built around. The vehicles stacked behind it. MTLB transports, recovery trucks, and support units can't push through without making the pileup worse, and they can't easily disperse because they've already chosen a narrow approach route. In seconds, the crossing attempt becomes a traffic trap, and a traffic trap on a front line becomes a target. And that's the real punchline of the scene. Ukraine didn't simply destroy a bridge. They used patience, decoys, and one decisive strike to freeze an entire movement plan, leaving the Russian column stuck on the wrong side of the river with no clean way forward and no clean way back. 7:46 a.m. The moment the bridge layer collapses into the water, the river stops being a crossing site and becomes a flare. Smoke hangs low over the bank, engines rev in confusion, and the Russian column behind the wreck compresses into the worst possible shape: tight spacing, limited turnarounds, and too many vehicles trying to solve the same problem at once. Russia's first response isn't a dramatic counterattack, it's damage control. Recovery trucks inch forward, soldiers wave vehicles back, and someone tries to create a new lane around the jam. But the riverbank is soft and uneven, and every detour risks burying another vehicle in mud. At the same time, their air defense posture flips from watching the sky to hunting the shooter. The same short-range systems and small arms fire that were focused on decoy drones now pivot outward, scanning for the launch corridor, trying to catch FPV pilots or spotter drones before the second hit arrives. Because after a strike like this, the real fear is not what already happened. It's what happens next while everyone is stuck. 7:50 a.m. The script's logic makes the next phase feel like a chase more than a battle. Russia throws up heavier electronic interference across the local area, trying to break the links that keep Ukrainian drones stable, while units on the ground start firing at anything that looks like an observer: birds, shadows, random specks drifting across the tree line. But Ukraine is not trying to stay and trade shots, they're trying to leave clean. The strike package doesn't linger over the wreck like a victory lap, because the longer drones loiter, the easier they are to track, jam, and trace back to control positions. So the withdrawal starts immediately. Spotter drones back off first, widening their orbit and slipping behind terrain. FPV teams stop chasing extra targets and switch to the safer discipline: confirm the kill, confirm the blockage, then disappear before Russia can lock a pattern. 7:05:04 a.m. On the Russian side, the recovery effort becomes a clock. If they can clear the lane fast, they can salvage the crossing plan. If they can't, they have to accept the worst operational outcome. The crossing attempt is not delayed by minutes, but reset by hours or days. And resetting isn't simple. A damaged bridge layer in the water isn't just equipment loss, it's a physical obstacle. It blocks the approach, it creates a visible landmark for Ukrainian observers, and it forces Russian units to either bring specialized recovery gear forward under threat or abandon the site and move to a new crossing point that has to be scouted from scratch. That's where the blowback turns strategic. A crossing attempt is a promise. We can move mass across this river. When it fails publicly, it doesn't just stall the vehicles on the bank. It changes how commanders plan the next move, because now they have proof that waiting longer doesn't make them safer, it makes them more predictable. 7:58 a.m. The most dangerous minutes are the ones where Russia tries to protect the recovery teams. Soldiers spread out into perimeter positions, scanning for another incoming FPV, because a second strike during recovery can multiply the damage, destroy the recovery vehicles, trap the jam even deeper, and turn a single failed crossing into a full-day disaster. Ukraine's side understands that too, but the script's emphasis is clear. The mission is not to keep striking until the bank is flattened. The mission is to break the crossing, then break contact, leaving Russia trapped with the consequences. By the time the smoke thins, the site is still active, men moving, vehicles reversing, equipment trying to reposition, but the crossing itself is dead. The river holds the wreck like an anchor, and the convoy behind it is no longer a spearhead. It's a queue, a stalled line of steel, stuck in a place it can't defend perfectly and can't leave quickly, while Ukraine's teams fade back into their hidden corridor, already quiet, already resetting, already waiting for the next attempt. 8:12 a.m. By the time the smoke thins, the riverbank no longer looks like a crossing point. It looks like a paused operation that can't unpause. The damaged pontoon section sits half submerged where it fell, and everything behind it is forced into the same ugly reality. There is no clean lane forward, only congestion and exposed movement. Russia's recovery teams work, but every action is slower than it should be. A tow line takes time to rig. A recovery truck needs space to reverse. A tracked vehicle trying to bypass the jam sinks into soft ground and has to be pulled back out. The crossing attempt doesn't fail like a switch. It fails like logistics, one delay causing another delay until the whole plan is no longer a plan. Above all of it, the air picture stays tense. Air defenses remain up. Electronic warfare keeps pushing interference, and soldiers keep scanning for drones that may not even be there anymore. That is the second-order effect the script is really about. Once a site is proven vulnerable, the defenders can't relax. They have to assume the next strike is already inbound, even if nothing is coming. And that anxiety changes behavior. Vehicles spread out more than doctrine wants. Units hesitate at open stretches. Engineers get guarded like a high-value asset. The crossing doesn't just become harder, it becomes psychologically expensive, because every minute spent here feels like a minute spent under a spotlight. For Ukraine, the impact is bigger than the physical damage. A pontoon bridge is not just equipment, it's a promise of momentum. Breaking it at the right moment doesn't just stop vehicles, it forces the enemy to restart the entire crossing problem. New site, new concealment plan, new timing, new risk. That's why this ending doesn't feel like victory music. It feels like calibration. Russia will adapt with different routes, tighter air cover, heavier jamming, and faster construction cycles. Ukraine will adapt too, refining how it watches, how it waits, and how it chooses the one moment when the bridge is most committed and least able to recover. The river goes quiet again, the way rivers always do. But now both sides know something they didn't know before. This corridor can be read, timed, and punished. And the next time a new pontoon section slides toward the waterline, it won't feel like an engineering task. It will feel like a countdown. If you want the next breakdown delivered like a clean radar lock, hit subscribe because the next crossing attempt won't get a second warning.